So Lost and Found was something that God put on Brian's heart and Shelley's heart and my heart the end of last year, and to meet the needs of anyone who has dealt with wounds or loss in their life. And so our vision statement is helping people heal through the power of Jesus Christ who have suffered loss through divorce, death, addiction, abuse, or any other traumatic, life-changing events. And so for most of us, even if we don't hit the major categories up there, we have wounds and everything from everyday life that qualify as dramatic, life-changing events. And sometimes it's just going to work and finding out that you miss one day of work and it's all different when you come back. Or unexpected something happening in our life that will change our lives forever. So, but through the power of Jesus Christ, He can heal and bring wholeness to our lives, even when they're interrupted. And that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight. Do I need to do this? So, okay. Sorry while we adjust. We're in a second part of I Can Never Be That Good, a comparison study of how we compare ourselves to others. Brian talked about last week how we look down at other people and to make ourselves feel better and to feel better about ourselves. And then tonight we're going to talk about I Can Never Be That Good. And we're going to use Moses as our example. And we're going to start in Exodus 3, verse 13 through 15. And we're going to jump into chapter 4. And I looked and tried to find you would think that one of those movies that have been made about the book of Exodus, that they would include this entire passage. But everyone that I could find on the internet, even the brand new one that just came out before Easter, leaves out really the most important part at the end of this section of Moses' interaction with God at the burning bush. So we know that Moses has been in the wilderness for 40 years after he grew up in Pharaoh's palace as Pharaoh's daughter's son. He didn't know that he was Egyptian for a long time. Then when he does discover that, he tries to make life better he doesn't know that he was Jewish, and he tries to make life better for the Jews, and he ends up killing someone, and he has fled to the desert for 40 years, and he is pretty isolated out there with in a nomad's lifestyle. He's met a family out there, and he's married a daughter, and so he's pretty isolated. The lifestyle he grew up in the palace is in his past, and he is taking care of his sheep out in the middle of the wilderness and comes across this bush that's not being consumed, but it's on fire. And he hears the voice of God coming from it, and God starts to tell him his plans for saving the Jews out of Egypt. So Moses starts to protest, and in the end of chapter 3, verse 13, we start with, "But Moses protested, 'If I go to the people of Israel and tell them that God is the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them?' God replied to Moses, 'I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you.' God also said to Moses, 'Yes, this is the people of Israel. Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations.'" And he goes on to tell him what he's going to do and how he's going to do it to rescue the Jews. And then going into chapter 14, it says, "But Moses protested again." I mean, if you're seeing a bush that's not being consumed, God's voice a voice is coming out of it, and he's telling you these incredible things, and he says, I am the who I am. I am the I am. And Moses is still protesting against it. But Moses protested again. What if they wouldn't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, "Oh Lord, the Lord never appeared to you"? Then the Lord said to him, "What is in your hand?" And a shepherd's staff, Moses replied. "Throw it down on the ground." The Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Then the Lord told him, "Reach down out and grab it by the tail." So Moses reached out and grabbed it and turned back into the shepherd's staff in his hand. Perform this sign, the Lord told him. Then they will believe you that you are the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, really has appeared to you. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out again, his hand was white as snow, with a severe skin disease. "Now put your hand back in the cloak," the Lord said. So Moses put his hand back in, and when he took it out, it was healthy and restored to the rest of his body. The Lord said to Moses, if they do not believe you and are not convinced by the first miracle sign, they will be convinced by the second sign. And if they don't believe you or listen to you, even after these two signs, then take water from the Nile River and pour it out on the dry ground. When you do, the water from the Nile will turn to blood on the ground. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, "O Lord, I am not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied, and the words get tangled up." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Who made a person's mouth? Who decided whether people seek or speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak. I will instruct you into what to say." But Moses again pleaded, "Lord, send anyone else." Then the Lord became angry with Moses. "All right," he said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he speaks well. And look, he is on his way to meet you now. He will be delighted to see you. Talk to him. Put the words in his mouth. I will be with both of you as you speak. I will instruct you both in what to do. Aaron will be your spokesman to the people. He will be your mouthpiece and will stand in the place of God you will stand in the place of God for him. Tell him what to say. And take your shepherd's staff with you and use it to perform miraculous signs to show you. I have shown you. Now, many times, so even after Moses had seen all of these miracles, God had, turned his staff into a snake, turned his hand probably into leprosy, and then restored it immediately. He still did not feel worthy enough and was scared to go back. And how many times have we felt that way in our lives? Lord, please send anyone else. Oh Lord, why me? How many times have we said that? Moses had many reasons, as we already talked about, to feel inadequate about what God was asking him to do. He'd been raised in the palace, as we talked about, and he was raised in Pharaoh's palace and lived as an Egyptian, and he didn't even know that he was a Jew. When he did find out, he had tried to stop the mistreatment of the Jews, and he ended up killing a man, an Egyptian. So then he had to flee into the desert to get away from Pharaoh, who wanted to kill him. So probably the last place on earth he wanted to go back to was Egypt, and because he really didn't know if they would try and kill him. But he didn't feel adequate to be God's servant. I think even if he hadn't had that fear of being killed when he got there. His first thought was of his past. The Jews wouldn't listen to him. So when God gave him the answers, showed him that he would do miracles on his behalf, he still didn't want to trust. He came up with his own physical ailments or shortcomings in his eyes that would prove that he wouldn't be able to do that. And how often do we let our past hold us back and say, I couldn't do that because we all know what we would fill into the blank. And, or just like Moses, if we've gotten past over our past and gotten our confidence or know that with God we can do anything, we don't feel equipped to do it. And we also say, I am not equipped to do it, and so please send someone else. And God says, I created you. He told Moses, who created your mouth, who gave you the words to speak, and who gave you the ability to hear, and said that he had all that power, that God had given him that power to do that, and if he had done that, he would give him the words. But so often we forget that. God said to Moses in Exodus 4:11 and 12, is when he said, who made the man's mouth, and who makes the man mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not the Lord? Therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say. And so often we want to see that physical evidence before we're willing to go. It's like Peter getting out of that boat. We're not willing to get out of that boat because we're afraid of sinking. And Jesus says, come. And God says, go. But we're not willing to take that first action to test it even. We're like, no. And Moses was the same way. No, I'm not equipped. I can't do it. But God replied to Moses in verse 14 of chapter 4, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And so often we go in our own power, and even when we know God sent us, we go, we feel like I'm here representing God. And that is not what God told Moses. He said, I am, and I am sending you, and I will be your spokesperson. I will give you the words to say. I like how Moses told God he was not good at his mouth, but God covers any other excuses Moses or us today might think that is inadequate. Moses continued to argue with God to the point of angering him. So God sent his brother Aaron to help him. I don't know if we want to test God to that point, that we anger him. But God did provide Aaron to help. And he knew that ahead of time. He knew Moses was going to argue and feel inadequate. And he was gracious to provide Aaron to be. But he still said he had to give Aaron the words to say. Moses still had to be willing to listen to what God was telling him to tell Aaron. And God said that he would tell Moses and that he made him equipped to do whatever he was asking him to do. In verse 4 of chapter 12. God is saying the same thing to each one of us tonight, that whatever lies ahead of us, whatever has been our past, whatever he's putting on our heart or he's putting in our path, what doors he's opening in our lives, and he's saying, go through those. He's giving us whatever we need, the words to say, the ability to do them, but we have to be able to take that step, get out of the boat, go, or speak to that person, whatever he's telling us to do. We have to put action to our faith. We can't just sit at home and say, God, I believe you're going to do this, and never be willing to talk to someone or put any action to our faith. God knew Moses had a past and that he would spend 40 years running from it in the desert. But he also knew he would speak to Moses through the burning bush, and he would send him back to Egypt to free the children of Israel. And we don't know exactly what God did in Moses' heart or in Moses' life in those 40 years in the desert, what he learned, if he learned to trust, I had a closer walk with God, or if he didn't even talk to God in that 40 years until God appeared to him in the burning bush. But we do know that he's faithful, and with the Holy Spirit today, we can take him everywhere we go. And we can always ask him, what do I need to do next? But we have to be willing to listen to that voice, whether it's coming from the burning bush or just that inner knowing that we know that he is speaking to us, and he will give us the ability to do whatever he's asking us to do. A few months ago, Randy Ruiz, an evangelist, was here, and he told the story of a man who lived in the Caribbean islands. He had spent years watching the large cruise ships sail by his island, and he said, I'm going to save the money, and told himself, one day I'm going to go on the large ship and see what it is and where it takes me, and why all those people are always on that ship. Finally, the day came, and he had saved enough money to sail on one of the ships. He got his ticket, he planned, and the day came for him to board the ship. He packed his suitcase, and he put cheese and crackers along with a few items of clothing. He was amazed at the greatness of the ship and the beauty of everything he saw. When it was time for the meals, he stayed in his cabin, and he had cheese and crackers. After a few days of being around and surrounded by the incredible food and looking into the dining room, if you've ever been on a cruise, there is food everywhere 24/7. And so everywhere he walked, there was food out, and the dining rooms are fine china and linens and silver and crystal goblets. He stopped one of the crew members one day and asked what he could do to cover the price of just one meal in the dining room. He told the man, I will do anything. I will wash windows. I will scrub the deck. Anything just to be able to eat one incredible meal that you are serving. The steward turned to the man and said, Sir, we don't have second class on this ship. All the meals are included in the price of your ticket. They were already paid in full. And the poor man was eating cheese and crackers, watching all this food, because he didn't think he could afford it. But for our lives, there is no second class in God's kingdom either. We are all God's children. We're all first generation. We are not grandchildren or great-grandchildren. He considers us all his children. He's created us each one individually, and there is no second class. It doesn't matter what our past looks like. It doesn't matter our shortcomings. It doesn't matter our physical abilities or lack thereof. We are all his children, and he has created us uniquely and individually for a plan and a purpose to glorify him. He has equipped you to do whatever he is calling you to do, and he will provide you with the strength and the abilities to take every step along that way. He gave Moses and the children of Israel a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day to lead them through to the promised land. But he also provided and caused all the plagues so that the Egyptians would be willing to let them go, get rid of them. And in that, he also had told Moses that when it was finally time that Pharaoh would release them, that they were to ask for the gold and the silver and the fine linens of the Egyptian people, and that they would be willing to give them. And so God wanted to bless his children with all the fine things of the Egyptian world that they were never allowed to have, and that would be just partial payment for what they had endured and labored for so many years in Egypt, but that he would free them. So just like the Egyptians, the Jews, he has provided, and the Israel children, he has provided for whatever we need, and he wants us to go with blessings and with honor, and so that people recognize that we are his children. A peace, a happiness, a joy, the fruits of the Spirit, you can't hide those inside. People notice them when you're when you're full of them. And that's God's witness. That's our ability to glorify God in just a small way as to what he's doing in our lives. In my devotion this morning, I found a perfect wrap-up and conclusion for this. I needed it probably as much as, or probably more than any one of you in the last few weeks and months. There's been some things that I thought were really, really stable in my life that are shifting a little. The foundations are not quite as bedrock as I thought. And yesterday morning I went into work. I'd had Friday off. I went into work and found out that by the end of this week, life could be a lot different there. And it's been pretty stable and pretty consistent for 10 or 12 years. I've been there for 25, and I've been in the position I have for 12, and it's been pretty steady. And there's probably some changes coming, and it could change drastically and affect my life in many different ways. And there's some other things that God's been showing me that is maybe not quite as bedrock foundation as I thought. But just like Moses, he'll give me the strength and he'll give me the direction to know exactly what it is. And if any of you are facing the same thing, he'll do exactly the same thing for you. So the devotion I was reading was God Calling, and it's written from Scripture, but it's written as if God is speaking directly to us. So Jesus is calling. I said God is calling. Jesus is calling, and it's an incredible devotion, but I want to read today's devotion to you. And if you want to be like Moses and imagine this coming from the burning bush or from the soul of your spirit, this is what God would say. I'm a mighty God. Nothing is too difficult for me. I have chosen to use weak ones like you to accomplish my purpose. My weakness is your weakness, not his, is designed to open you up to my power. Therefore, do not fear your limitations or measure the day's demands against your strength. What I require of you is to stay connected to me, living in trusting dependence on my limitless resources. When you face unexpected demons, there is no need to panic. Remember that I am with you. Talk with me and listen while I talk you through each challenging situation. I am not a careless God. When I allow difficulties to come into your life, I equip you fully to handle them. Relax in my presence, trusting my strength. And one of the verses that is based off of is 2 Corinthians 12:9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all more gladly about your weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me. 2 Corinthians 12:9. So even when it looks impossible, or we feel like we are just getting beat up by the world, and there's no light, and we don't know which way's up anymore, God says, I am the mighty God. Nothing is too difficult for me. And that in our weaknesses, his presence and his strength is revealed. So I hope as you face things this next week or in the next month, no matter how big or small they are, that you remember that he is a mighty God.